Now, Alex is a media guy, ESPN college football analyst, so we're just going to offer him, I guess, for bragging rights. Alex, would you ride in a Blue Angel, one of those media sorties that they offer? If they offered you one, would you take them up on it?
No way. Not going to happen. It's weird. As I get older, I get more neurotic about especially heights, to where if there's a balcony on my hotel room, I will not go all the way out to the edge of it. I'm willing to out myself on that. No way I'm getting in a plane where all there is like a little inch of glass between me and death. No, no, thank you.
I'm like that you as well. The balcony, especially when you're up really, really high and you go out there and you look, and it almost makes you dizzy just by looking down, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Oh. Well, and I just picture myself somehow flipping and falling like a cartoon character and just tumbling over. It's not a good sight inside of my head. It's not good. I stay away from it.
No, I'm the exact same way. We're also talking about Friday the 13th, pregame rituals. Do you have anything that you do when you're covering a game? Is there anything pregame that you do? Pregame rituals? Do you do anything unique?
I'm trying to rack my. The only odd thing I do is I get to stadiums kind of insanely early.
You and I
like
both. We normally
early.
See each other. We normally have a conversation. Yeah, we're both early.
I know. I'm trying to help myself. I'm trying to change that about myself because there's a lot of wasted time in there. But again, I just play it out like there's going to be an accident and I'm going to be sitting there. And the worst thing that could ever happen to me is if I would miss this part of a game, which wouldn't even be the end of the world. But no, I'm like a good 3-4 hours before kickoff for some reason.
Alex, what do you think has been the biggest thing coming out of Tuscaloosa as far as practice? We're closing in on today, Saturday, and then we've got 3 next week. So I guess we're in number 11 this afternoon. What has been the biggest takeaway that you've had from Alabama practice here in Tuscaloosa?
I don't know if there's anything necessarily that I'd say, this is going to impact them in the coming season. The number of injuries is kind of a little concerning. Just none of them seem to be really severe. But when you only have 2 or 3 or 4 scholarship receivers out there, and you're really thin at defensive back as well, especially considering you already lost your top 5 defensive backs from last season to graduation in the NFL, there's not a lot of depth there. So I think it's going to be interesting, and in some ways, maybe you get guys who might not otherwise get snaps, some repetitions that could serve them well in the future. But that's sort of one thing that I've been sort of taken aback by is, the number of injuries and how they've sort of added up.
And this injury bug, for some reason, they're just not able to shake it here in Tuscaloosa. I mean, like you said, it has continued from the 2017 season.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, too, is if this was, instead of April, if it was September, would things be a little bit different in terms of guys giving it a go? I imagine with a couple of them it probably would be. But, you err on the side of caution now, and then they'll develop depth, especially when they get, the second wave of players come in, especially at defensive back. They're going to get some reinforcements there. So, again, it's not something I see heading into the season. And as I said, I think last time I was on the show, what they survived last year in terms of injuries at one specific position at linebacker, something like that, knock on wood, Alabama fans. I don't think you're going to see anything like that happen again anytime soon. That many injuries at one position. So I'm not altogether concerned about it.
Alex, a lot of different conversations that we will talk about next week, really a lot in details, is this big redshirt thing where players could play 4 games, up to 4 games, but it does not have to be at the beginning to qualify for a medical redshirt. They can play up to 4 games and still qualify for a redshirt. Where do you stand on the possibility of a new rule in college football? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? You think it's good? Do you think it's bad?
I don't want to be a cynic in this. I don't want to be the get off my lawn guy, because I totally understand why coaches love it. It's purely beneficial to them. But I just don't see why it's necessarily needed. The rosters are already large. Coaches already manipulate rosters as it is. I don't really see why it's altogether necessary. But at the same, and the other concern I have is, we've already seen it. I know Alabama in particular is it hasn't been as many headlines about it lately, but the quote-unquote roster management with guys transferring or medical redshirt. You see the numbers kind of massaged every year to get under that total number. Well, if you start having guys who are, more fifth-year seniors on your roster, it's going to make it even more difficult. So I've questioned about how the numbers sort of add up. But, I don't think it's going to hurt anything if it necessarily happens. Coaches will love it. I just don't necessarily see why it's all that important to get done. Maybe it's a good thing for their experience, but I don't know. It doesn't do a lot for me.
We followed this in Tuscaloosa. You could go back to when Derrick Henry had the 395 carry season in the Heisman campaign. Alabama was short on running backs, one of the reasons why they had to sort of run him to death a little bit. We talk about the injuries from this past year. One of the things that maybe it can help them out there, but I'd love to see this 85 number get pushed up to maybe 90 total scholarships and maybe offer a few more opportunities out there, because you see a team like Alabama that plays as many games as they do. Maybe we need to up this number a little bit where you can have 85, or maybe this red shirt gives us that flexibility.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think adding scholarship numbers up is probably a good thing. The one thing I don't want to hear come out of a coach's mouth, and I've already heard this sort of floated out there, is, oh, well, it's unfair if you suddenly go into a playoff and you're playing all these guys we've never seen during the course of the season. Yeah. And to me, that's just miss me with that, because you've never seen them, but they're true freshmen who have never played in a game. So you don't know how good they are, and neither is the coach that's playing them. I don't think there's any added benefit on either side. So I don't want to hear coaches complain about that side of things if this does end up coming to fruition.
Alex, a gigantic story in this part of the country is this. Shea Patterson, what do you think about Ole Miss trying to jump in and block his eligibility at Michigan for the upcoming year? What do you think?
I don't understand it. I just simply don't know why Ole Miss continues again and again and again and again to make this worse. Just let it go and move on and start rebuilding what the image of your program is. There's no reason for it. You have that. The NCAA already put that second year of the bowl ban in place. You can appeal that. But in the meantime, you're just looking like you're out for revenge. You're out for some sort of punitive revenge on a player who you don't need to do that to. And besides, it's not as if Shea Patterson was the end-all, be-all for their roster. They have Jordan Ta'amu. They've got a good quarterback. You don't need to do this. And if the whole argument that, maybe it sets a precedent, or maybe it, changes the way people look at their appeal, what happened to common sense? Just say the kid came to Ole Miss thinking one thing was going to happen in terms of their what they're able to do in terms of postseason. That changed, and he wants to leave. Coaches can leave for every reason under the sun. If a player wants to leave for that reason, it's a pretty good reason to me. Let him go. Nobody's hurt, and don't look like you're still out to prove something. You already sullied your reputation up.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at it. Alex, to try to go to the other side, I'm trying to look at it from an Ole Miss perspective. I just can't see what there's to gain other than a bunch of bad PR around that university.
I agree. I don't. Maybe there's something that when we hear it'll make total sense, but I just don't see what you're doing other than making yourself continue to look bad. I mean, maybe it's if we set this precedent, we'll have a whole bunch of guys transferring out anyway. Well, you've already sort of had that first wave happen. Again, Ole Miss, you have done enough to yourself. Don't continue inflicting damage, because this is going to be used against you, publicly and in recruiting and all of that. It's just not a good look.
Alex, you were down on the plains just a couple of days ago for spring. What was the big takeaway as you watched Auburn go through spring drills?
Well, I saw a couple camels walking to the game. That was fun. I saw a bunch of recruits take the field. That was the biggest takeaway. Hold
on a minute. Your two highlights from Auburn's spring game was camels on the campus and recruits coming on the field?
Well, isn't that what spring games are for, Ryan? I thought they were. That's essentially what they are. They're for fans and recruiting. That's what they're not for. If you talk to coaches, if they're honest with you, there's very little they get out of these games. It's just not. It's nothing more than really just a show for fans. And I get it. Maybe they should. You got 15 practices. Give fans a little something in the middle of spring to get them through to fall. Build up a little buzz. Maybe make a little money on the side. But there's not much more to it than that. But on the field with Auburn, with no Jarrett Stidham, with injuries there, they've had a bunch of injuries themselves, especially at the receiver position with Eli Stove and Will Hastings. They're an interesting team to me. I don't feel like they got any better or worse. The wide receiver stuff is compelling to me to see how, if any of those guys are able to come back. The one big takeaway I do have from Auburn, maybe not from the game itself, but from spring as a whole, that defensive line with Montravius Adams and Nick Coe and Derek Brown, it's going to be really darn good this year. I'm not going to say they'll have the best defense in the SEC because of it, but they're going to be able to get after the quarterback. Kevin Steele, once again, is going to have a very good defense on the Plains. I really think their talent on that side of the ball, even what they lose with Jeff Holland, is going to be in a really good place.
What do you feel is the biggest question they have?
To me, it's receiver and maybe offensive line, although I don't think with what we saw late last season, their line could have played much worse. But receiver, for the past 2 or 3 years, I don't think they've had a dynamic playmaker who can, win those 50-50 balls and take over a game like we've seen maybe, with a Duke Williams had that ability, obviously couldn't stick around. Sammy Coates was a guy who could stretch the field consistently. They haven't had that guy, and then in the past they lost one of those guys who might be him. Kyle Davis had to transfer out, and now you've had a couple of different injuries with, again, Hastings and Eli Stove, and Nate Craig Myers hasn't really become the guy. I just wonder, there's no doubt in my mind that Jarrett Stidham has the talent to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league and maybe even the country, but will he have the guys at receiver that can really let him do everything he can do? They need to find some guys who can create some separation to make plays.
Alex, are you buying that LSU is setting up for a terrible season in 2018? Are you buying this? I mean, we're hearing 6-7 wins total, possibly 8. Is that really going to happen in Baton Rouge?
I'm asking myself the same question, and I don't know because this isn't one of they've had 2 or 3 guys coming back every year on both sides of the ball, like a Geist or a Fournette, and that defense has always been so loaded with young talent that we've sort of known a little bit about in the past. And this year feels a little bit different. It doesn't feel like they've got those pieces quite returning like we've become accustomed to. And on top of that, there's still huge questions in my mind about Ed Orgeron as head coach. When, the first big move you made after becoming the full-time head coach was, I'm going to go, find my brilliant offense coordinator in Matt Canada, and we're going to change everything. And oh, wait, he's gone after 1 year. And now we're going with Steve Ensminger, who may or may not have a few tricks up his sleeves. I have huge questions about LSU. Something tells me I should give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and say that maybe the baseline is 8 wins. But it wouldn't surprise me if this was a year where they took a little bit of a step back, just because I'm not as sure of the talent that they have returning, and I'm not as sure of the coaching staff, especially on offense, that they're going to be able to, draw up plays and do things the way they need to do in today's game to generate offense.
Alex Scarborough, ESPN college football analyst. Alex, always appreciate the conversation. Certainly talking a lot about SEC football, and Alabama's preparing for a big scrimmage tomorrow. Then we've got spring training. We got Tua versus Jalen. And I guess Nick Saban, will he play Tua on Fan Day, A-Day, just for the fans? I mean, maybe we'll encourage 90,000+ to get in there. But if he comes out and says Tua's going to be limited, I don't know how many he's going to really go in and watch if he's not going to be part of the conversation.
It's a good point. We'll be watching the quarterbacks regardless of who goes out there. Maybe Mac Jones, but we're paying attention.
There you go. But I don't know. I mean, what is Mac Jones and Jalen like? If they're on one side and he's on the other, does that really encourage you to go fight the traffic to get in to watch a spring game, as you say?
Well, at the very least, we can get the section of the fans who want to give Jalen a hard time about anything he does.
You're right.
They can dissect Jalen Hurts a little bit more.